We're off to a good start today. Shout out to the first two panels. I think that was great, and the speakers, that was awesome. I think we're off to a really good start. It's about to get even better. Like Ben mentioned, I met some of you guys earlier today, but for those I didn't meet, Eric Jackson, sports business reporter at Sportico, and I'm joined by three gentlemen who are experts in this space. Kyle Love, Vice President of Arena Technology at Barclays, Brandon Nutting, Vice President of Data Science and Innovation at MVP Index, and Mike Sciortino, General Manager at UBS. Gentlemen, how are y'all? Y'all feeling good?
Excellent.
Great.
Wonderful. Love this room and the sirens.
September is beautiful in New York.
Very New York. You know, it's not New York without the sirens in the back, right? So
they pump that in.
We have a lot to cover in this one, so we'll jump into it. But, you know, I kind of want to start with a little conversation. You know, I was on the phone with the team owner last week and, you know, I'm just chopping it up. And, you know, he mentioned to me, he was like, you know, Eric, the biggest opponent for our team isn't the defending champions or the conference rival. The biggest opponent is the 60-inch TV in the fans' living room. You know, meaning the comfort of an at-home experience, you know, keeping people from coming into the arena. So I want to kind of flip it to you gentlemen and, you know, ask you, you know, how critical is it in today's world to lean into the digital innovation in the sense of keeping fans satisfied and, you know, making their experience worthwhile to keep them, you know, coming back, right? You know, from retail to back in to concessions.
Yeah, I think there's nothing like live entertainment, right? Like, you can't fully replace that feeling of being in an arena or a stadium, the energy that you feel from your fellow guests, from the team, from the atmosphere that we're creating from a game presentation perspective. And so you can never replace that fully. But you're right, you know, we're dealing with, you know, a new generation of fans. And that generation just happens to be glued to their phones and glued to their TVs, right? So, you know, the challenge is always, you know, finding those little details that we can enhance the fan experience, make it easier for people to get to our arena, make it easier to buy things, make it easier to enjoy the experience. And so some of that, you know, some of that is achieved naturally. But it's a challenge that everybody faces, and especially in New York when you have so many different arenas and stadiums and competition all around. So it's something that we're always striving to get better at.
Yep. So I agree with everything that Kyle said. But seriously, you know, live events they kind of speak for themselves. I think they will last as the world changes and people spend their money in all different ways. Live events will stay there, and it's our job to make that as desirable and as easy as possible for people to buy their tickets, to come to our venue, to plan their trip, to come to our venue, to enter our venue, to be at their seats, to get their food, drink, use the bathroom, and make it the best experience possible. Obviously, driven by technology, I think, is the differentiator for us now. And then to get home and tell us all about it.
Brandon, you have a really unique perspective on it too.
I mean, I'm fine with them being on the 60-inch TVs too, since I'm measuring that space as well. But no, that's a great point. All of these points, and what we're interested in understanding is like what actually drives that experience. What do people want to get out of that experience, and then integrating with the technology that's coming out that we'll talk about a little bit, so we can actually measure it from a sponsorship perspective. Because the sponsorship elements that go into all of that tech also have to be quantified. So somebody who's interested in buying a sponsorship that's media visible on the television may have a different approach that they're interested in within the stadium. So we want to understand both perspectives, and we want to be able to quantify both perspectives.
Yeah, you know, it feels like arena operators of the past and decades, right? It was a bit of a guessing game for them to know what a fan was doing once they entered the doors, right? That's changed a lot now. How are you guys utilizing just technology to, you know, in the operations on the event days and, you know, games, concerts, and how is that, you know, impacting long-term business decisions? Michael.
So technology is great, and you know, we were brick and mortar for so long. I like to think I'm not that old, but I've been around a little while, and what we did 20 years ago, it doesn't even, the way we operate these venues does not look like what we're doing now, virtually in any way, in particular behind the scenes. From all the different tools that we use to manage the event, I myself work off of like an executive dashboard app that shows me people scanning in, what entries they're scanning in, the clip they're scanning in. I can measure that against milestones. Same thing for food and beverage, same thing for merch. We can see who's buying what and where. And then that helps us identify when we have a problem. Usually when we see that maybe not enough tickets were scanning in a certain entrance, that's because we had an issue with a scanner there, not loading it, not necessarily an issue that we need to address. But it gives us eyes and ears. Same thing with parking, which is a huge part of our business and what we do, and incident tracking and the way we communicate. Like, it's all through technology now. Now, talk about more as we go through this, but every problem that we have, we look at through the lens of technology and data and how we can use that to help us manage, and ultimately it's all about all the different touch points for our guests and how we can make those better and easier for them.
Because you can literally track, if there's like running out of paper, right, or soap in the back, like you're down to the T, right?
So we do that. We have the sensors in our restrooms that tell us, they give us a warning when the toilet paper reaches a 25% low, or soap or paper towels. And I'd like to think our staff doesn't need that, but the reality is that's certainly a good backup. And what it really is it also keeps them honest, and it keeps us, we're able to track just looking back and saying, well, how did we do last night? Did we get to red? Because it's obviously it's like heat map, but so we don't want to get to red. So if it's yellow, and how quickly are we turning it over? And of course, if it gets to red, are we going there right away and replacing it? And we can see how quickly that happens too. So it's technology like that helps us.
Yeah, and for our facility, if you've been to Barclays Center, we're right outside a major MTA hub, right? So we're at Atlantic Terminal, and so we're getting a ton of subway traffic, Long Island Railroad traffic, bus traffic even. And so everybody goes through the front entrance, right? Like UBS Arena is a nice big arena, and there's multiple entrances, and you can come from different directions, whether it's the parking garage or the MTA there. For us, everybody just crams into that front entrance. And so we leveraged AI technology from a company called Wait Time, who've been great partners for us, and they're literally just kind of monitoring the volume of people that are outside that main entrance, not only informing them of what their wait time is, but also communicating, hey, it's a 15-minute wait time here, but if you go down the block, to this entrance, you'll get right in. So leveraging stuff like that has definitely been helpful to us, and we'll continue to invest in things like that.
Brendan?
No,
Yeah, good. Brandon, you have a really unique perspective. You're always dealing with brands and vendors, and I'm really curious. You're working with them from a standpoint of they're using the digital assets, right, and signage, and how are you helping them maximize their return on investment? Because ROI is so important, especially in this economic environment. People want to know, where their dollars are going.
Yeah, we work with both the brand side and the property side, as well as the team side, agencies. So we're on all sides. And so a lot of what we're seeing now is a lot of pressure of what the ROI is. How do I measure this? How do I quantify this? So a lot of the stuff we've been doing lately is around integrating with the various tech forms that you all are describing. So if you have sponsorship assets that are being projected, or you have virtual assets or anything like that, rather than the traditional way of doing things of concentrating on taking those and scanning them or trying to figure out tracking or all those kinds of things, we want to directly integrate with the technology provider that's putting those up there, because that gives us the source of truth. So we want to understand what was projected. We can take and cross-reference some of the traffic points as far as who's in what areas and things like that. But we always know what's on, where it was on, how long it was on, how much of it was provided or viewed or seen or all of that, if we directly integrate with the software providers that are giving that information out. So we've really taken the approach of, we've got abilities to scan things in traditional ways. We've got abilities to understand where things were in traditional ways. But if we go to the source and we're understanding what's actually being put out there, we can better quantify that. And that's super important for the brand side, who's going to be knocking on your doors and saying, we paid X number of dollars for this. How many people saw it? How often was it displayed? How great was it at driving traffic to that area of the arena? So we can actually answer that on the backside and provide data related to that now.
Yeah, with these modern arenas, right, Brandon? Do you feel like there's more opportunity? You walk into a plaza, there's signage there, and everywhere you turn, it seems like it's not the big concrete, cathedrals from the past, you would say, right?
Yeah, we were talking about Dectronics earlier in the green room, and it's the digital signage you went from standard static signage or something painted, then you went to LEDs where you can rotate things, and now you're looking at a combination of those where you can rotate things, but you can also put something on TV that's not in the arena anymore. So that's the big changes that are happening. And not only can I just put things on that aren't in the arena, I can dictate which market that's running in, or which channel it's running on, or which feed that's running on. And so that tech is allowing the arenas to sell things differently now. So what you're selling within the space of people actually sitting there and seeing can be completely unique to what's actually on TV or being seen from the media space. So that opens up a lot of different doors from a sponsorship lane, but it also gives you kind of these sponsorship tiers that weren't necessarily available before, because you would have in hockey, for example, you would have a dasher board that you would sell, and you would say some amount of that is going to be media visible, it's going to be on TV, it's going to be on Bally or the NHL Network or whatever. And then you would say, obviously, people who walk in the room will see this asset as well. Now you can say, well, there's a more limited set of that on TV because we're reselling that. We now have an availability of selling a different asset on TV than what's actually being seen within the stadium. So that opens some doors to have different conversations with partners about hyper local and what stays actually there versus what's actually on TV in a more national audience. Or if you're selling on a regional sports network or a DTC market, you can change and tailor all of your advertising accordingly.
No, that's great for sure. And I feel like data has just been a topic of conversation, a theme, right, today. And I want to ask you all about just, customer data, right? How are you guys utilizing that? Not just to drive revenue, but also to make the experience for a fan more personable and immersive. Michael.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult for venues and teams to build the profile of their fan, right? So we have known fans, we have unknown fans, right? Known fans are ticket buyers, merch buyers, that people who subscribe to email blasts, things of that nature. And then you have the unknown fan of the social media follower, the casual fan, that type of thing. So, I think we're always trying to leverage as much as we can, extract as much as we can from those types of things. And also, to his point about, leveraging our existing technology to continue to build that perfect fan. Perfect's not the right word, but the ideal fan that we know is going to come back, repeat customer. So yeah, I mean it's a tough balance between becoming too annoying, right, and always trying to pull, extract people and try to get them out to our venue for something that maybe they're only here for a game a year or so. So it's a delicate balance, but I think we have enough tools to continue to, like I said, build that fan based on what we know and what we don't know.
As we head into events, and this is more of a macro level, but we look at an individual or an event coming up, and concerts is a little more specific because Islander games, we kind of know what we're expecting each time. But we look at previous data. So we look at the ticket buyer data, so where you're buying it from, what the demographic is, what the age is, what the gender is, because if it's heavily women, like the pop Taylor Swift or a pop concert or something. By the way, we'd love to book Taylor Swift.
Big hit.
We convert the bathrooms, right? And so we can prepare for all of these things. We find out when everyone's arriving. We put a whole document together that's got a heat map from Ticketmaster that tells us where all the tickets are purchased. And so we can see what direction cars are going to be coming from, so we can potentially staff differently. We look at past data for comparable events that tell us, how many people take the train, how early they arrive. Do we need to be out, or, do we need to be out, like a couple hours before doors because people start lining up for that type of event, or are they going to hit us really hard right at like the ticketed the time on the ticket? So we do a lot of that. It's kind of this pre-event like demographic report that we put out, and people on the team in the various different departments can kind of use as they see fit, like wherever it might help them. I like to think everyone's reading everything. And then for what it's worth too, we'll also go back to kind of our like post-event reports and the different narratives and the things that went right and went wrong from comparable events, and then we'll do that. So kind of, and so then we'll try and get ahead of those, for that particular event. So that's one thing. I think from the premium side, right, and our industry is built on premium. As
more and more premium.
And just understanding and learning our customers. Again, it's just all about the data and our whole team that is there to service them and make sure they know when they walk in the door, and we have whatever they need, whether they're a kosher customer or have specific other dietary needs, and ensuring they're going to be there that night. And So then we'll do that. And then just the last thing I'll say from like a customer data perspective is it does seem like everyone we work with from a sponsorship standpoint or partnership standpoint is looking for their data. I could list like 10 of our partners who what they want in our arena is to get the data of the people who are seeing and touching their promotion and their thing and their activation. So that's kind of the driver behind almost everything that we do now. So it's there. We're learning as much as we can, and we're using that to kind of deliver a better event and a better experience for our guests, like as much as possible.
I feel like that's a perfect segue, Brandon. Are you getting the phone calls like we need the data? What?
It was interesting during the pandemic. We kind of moved a little bit away from experiential for a while, and we're focused more on the media because obviously people weren't going to events. So we were really heavily invested in the media space, and we spent some money on acquiring data more related to media. And so the overarching thing that we've kind of settled on is that the idea of targeting one-to-one is really changing. And I think the arenas, stadiums do a really good job of keeping track of who their fans are, ingesting all of the data as far as ticket purchases, and they do a good job on their internal. And then the problem that I think people try to do is then take that and try to generalize it to like a one-to-one on social, try to generalize that to a one-to-one on media as far as watching broadcast space, whether that's DTC, OTT, whatever. And I think that's going to continually get more and more difficult, and it was always hard to begin with. And so really thinking about those spaces completely uniquely is the way to consider this. And obviously you've got ideas of crossover, of taking your individualized data from your attendance and trying to think about it and how to grab from those other buckets. But you really need to keep the buckets separate. And a lot of the times we were working with a lot of companies back before the pandemic who were trying to pull those data sets together. And it's incredibly difficult. And continues to be more difficult as we have these bigger talks about the media landscape and media rights deals and all of that. It's going to get more and more segmented, whether you go to DTC, which actually probably could draw some of that back in, but it's going to get more difficult to figure that out. And so a lot of the thing that I say to people about this sort of one-to-one pipe dream is like, stop thinking about it like that, zoom out a little bit, consider the different buckets and try to play in each lane individually, and understand that the one-to-one is going to get harder and harder and harder as time goes on. We don't have the same regulations that European standards do, but they're coming. As soon as somebody here understands what all that means at that legislative level, they will start coming here. And so we will start having issues with that and people trying to pass legislation about privacy. And so you're going to have issues getting things that aren't voluntarily given to you as a fan or entering a sweepstakes or something like that. Outside of those voluntary grabs, it's going to get harder and harder.
But I feel like it's difficult, right? I know you can't get the one-to-one all the time, but you can't generalize either, right? A big group of fans. Like, how does that balance, Brandon? You know,
I mean, you can generalize on a lot of different behavior. I think that's part of the problem is instead of looking at like what they do, instead of looking at who they are, look at what they do. Right. And so that if you can get into behavior data of some angle, that is going to give you a better understanding of what people are willing to do when it comes to buying tickets or going to games, instead of trying to profile that they are women of this age and that they are, a sports fan. Like, what do they do outside of that? And there's a wealth of data that exists that can be tied to like zip codes, that can be tied to areas, that can be tied to designated market areas when it comes to media. And those are all data points that could help you better build like a regional understanding of people that could then let you go after that group based on what they're actually doing rather than these like subsets of understanding. So it's going to get difficult, but you have to kind of choose that broad generalization is going to be where I go, because what you'd hate to do is build out some great method of targeting one-to-one or hyper segmenting and then slowly watching that chip away. So it's like, let's start by going where we know is going to exist for a long period of time and investing some money and some time and some effort in there. And then as everyone else is falling off because they're chipping away at that one-to-one, you're already set up in that sort of broader bucket that's helping you, and you're doing A/B testing and experimenting in that segment instead of going after this one-to-one.
I love that. Think smarter, right? Yeah. So the digitalization of sports arenas has really changed the way rights holders are communicating with fans, right? And shareholders too. I'm curious y'all's thoughts on, what comes to mind when you think of just how vendors and venues are, sort of leveraging that digital infrastructure, especially from a sponsorship standpoint. I mean, I see a lot of branding at UBS, Michael.
I mean, yeah, you although it's a beautiful building, you can't turn the corner without a screen in front of you and some sort of data capture that we're doing. So it's like I said before, we're just trying to capture as much information from the guests that we have that interact with that particular brand or that particular partner in whatever way that they're activating, whether it's just visually or it's on, they're signing up for our Wi-Fi and we're giving their information that way. So I think that's the main theme, is putting as much in front of people as possible, as subtly as possible, and capturing as much information as possible.
Not so subtle sometimes, right?
Not so subtle at times, but that's what they signed up for too.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, a lot of the similar challenges and successes in terms of leveraging technology to enhance the fan experience, but also just ease of service. We've invested in a lot of frictionless technology, which through Zip-In and Mashkin and a couple of others that are in development. But just trying to ease those pain points of long lines, or I'm not sure what I want. You're standing behind somebody like that, and so those like grab and go type concepts have really done great for our building, and we're continuing to look at ways that we can expand that. And so all that kind of plays in, right? Like you scan your credit card, you walk in, you grab what you want, and you walk out. And so it's been really successful for us over the last 2 or 3 years, I would say.
It's a tricky market, I guess. Because we look at naming rights, sponsorship, valuations, and so we're trying to figure out what all goes into that, right? And it's like the signage everywhere is obviously the obvious one, but having like endemic abilities to be able to Barclays Center, your credit card, ease, frictionless, whatever. We've seen stuff like Toyota Center, free parking for Toyota. Like if you can build that endemic relationship as part of it, then that makes it more cohesive, because we're seeing when you have these long-term sponsorship deals, what we're seeing is this like negative reaction when those go away, because people are it becomes an endemic, it becomes a relationship, right? Like the Staples Center gets mentioned all the time. Like people are never going to stop calling it the Staples Center. Do you want to be the brand that buys into it after that?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, you don't. Like that you're going to have this like negative backlash right out of the gate. And so that's an interesting change in the way things are done. And so I don't know what that means for the future, but it means that you want to be very careful about these long-term deals if you're the brand, because that once that goes away, that it's going to become a problem. Like FTX, right? It was all over everything, and now they're having to change, and it's associated with negativity. And so that negative association could have a downstream effect on the valuation of the brand and the value of the sponsorship in return for the property.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a really good point. And it's really, we're just in such a new era. And I think last year was the first Super Bowl, I think, there was no paper tickets, right? How many of you guys are paper ticket? I know we got some collectors in here who still got it hung up at their house. Exactly, So I think it's really interesting how we've just changed with these modern arenas, and a lot of them are highlighted by this next generation of mobile technology. And, just overall, just how much has the personal mobile app just been a game changer? In a lot of ways, it seems like that's the go-to.
I mean, I think that from our arena standpoint, we have a great app. I think that we are still trying to maximize its usage. I think there's a lot of ways. We've had a lot of ideas, and there's a lot of technology out there that people have talked about and tried to develop that get people into that app. But an arena app, at the end of the day, you go there if you're maybe a season ticket member, and you go there for your wallet. You go there if you need to find out some information. If you have an issue, we want you to go there, and you can text it in through the app. But would love, kind of an advancement in some of the technology that really drives people to use the app more, if I'm being completely honest. Mobile ordering is an interesting thing where, we have it, we do it. Not a lot of people use it. And I thought that was something coming out of, a post-COVID world that I thought was just going to take off. We all went cashless, and correctly so, and we're never looking back for lots of reasons. I thought that mobile ordering was something that was going to stick around. And that's, that would be a major driver for app usage. But that's been our experience. I don't know if it's different. That's a great question. I was not expecting that. I thought I was going to say it and just move on. Honestly, I think that I'm also, it's funny because I'm a different type of customer myself. I'm the guy who wants to sit in my seat and not miss as much action as possible, whether that's a concert, whether that's a game, and so know exactly when I'm going to go to the bathroom, ensure that I'm going at a time that the line's not that long, and the same thing for my food and beverage, know exactly where I'm going to go, likely what I want to get, not spend a lot of time there deciding or waiting in line. So I assumed everyone else was like that also, because that seems like, you spend a lot of money to come to these events. And everything that I do, and I think that what we do here, is just try and minimize lines. That's the main key to success, I think, from an experience standpoint. But I think that I underestimated people and their behaviors. And so I think you have people who say, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. Oh, I'm going to go grab a beer. And then they just go. And they're so used to that over so many years. And the idea of taking your phone out. So now you're still in your seat. You take your phone. This is my theory, by the way, because you asked. But yeah, I think that people are just behaving differently than I expected, because I think maybe it's more cumbersome than I anticipated for someone to sit in their seat and make all those decisions, pull up the stand that they want to go to, order the thing they want to go to, pay for it, even though that's getting easier and easier to pay on your phone, right? That's an additional step, as opposed to just running up, looking, going. It's past habits, I guess, would be how I'd summarize it. I don't know if that's the best answer, but.
Yeah, no, I echo everything that you just said. We've had a similar challenge. We put in-seat ordering, so not on the app, but if you're seated in certain sections, you have a QR code on the armrest, scan it, put your order in, and we bring out your order to you. It hasn't taken off like I thought it would, and I subscribe to the same theories that, like, we should be sitting in our seat and enjoying the event, but we're dealing with different generations and different viewing habits and such. And so yeah, I mean, we had a similar challenge, but continuing to drive awareness that putting your credit card information is not. It's safe. It's going to be okay. So we've gotten some of that feedback too, like hesitancy of putting credit card information, which seems crazy at this point. But yeah, that's some of the feedback that we've gotten from our setup.
I would layer in two things. One, totally agree. In-seat ordering, we've hardly even rolled it out because there just isn't a demand for it, and it's a lot operationally. But you'd think that's the kind of thing that even a premium customer sitting, 20 rows because they're right up front, they would want that, and we haven't seen it a lot. I'll say at UBS Arena. So the other thing too is that we have an Amazon Just Walk Out. We have 2 of them, and what's interesting is that that's a super. I mean, it's frictionless. You stick your card in, you grab your things, and you literally walk out. And the sales there are still comparable to if we had someone standing there selling beer. It's a cool experience. I think it'll pick up in time. I think part of the reason for that is because we don't have long lines elsewhere as well. So it's not like, oh, that's the place where there aren't long lines. But it is interesting, and I think just like learning people's habits is always fascinating, and one of my favorite parts of my job.
Brandon, are vendors wanting people to come to the app? I'm sure that's the big mainstay, right, to drive them there.
Well, yeah, because that's where they can stick sponsors and everything. I don't know. I guess the conspiracy theory here would be, let's make the lines longer so you're staring at the sponsors longer, I guess.
Noted.
But yeah, that's ultimately because then we can track who's using the app, if that sponsorship is part of the app, they're exposed to it in the app, and so that's the downstream of that. But yeah, so I think most of the sponsors would prefer that people are utilizing the app for in-seat ordering. But it is interesting to hear that it's not being adopted. It's fascinating for me from the sort of human behavior side, for sure.
I know, and we talk a lot about data collection. How do you kind of manage that balance, right, of trying to ramp up the collection, but also not trying to turn a fan off? You mentioned the credit card. It seems like a thin balance. It seems like a balance to be made. Trying not to, get more information from a fan, but not turn them away at the same time.
I think we're still dealing with a generational change in terms of, hey, I love my printed ticket. I pay with cash. I do all these things that are kind of old school. And so we're obviously, the newer generation is coming in with, Venmo and frictionless. And, we have dozens of, Grubhub and DoorDash delivery guys downstairs, outside our venue, because like everybody wants that like personal touch and that frictionless experience. So yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think we're constantly learning our fan behaviors. That's the theme of this. We may be experts, or some may call us experts. I wouldn't call myself an expert. But we're learning more and more, and that's always going to change, right, as we continue to manage these venues.
And maybe some fans don't care or are oblivious to it too. I would be curious to know too what that looks like.
I'd say one of the tricks too is just forcing them to do it. If there's a thing you want and you have to give your information to get it, then that seems to be the only way that really works.
That works too.
I think we all know that already.
Brandon, you,
No, I mean, I'll echo the same things. It's just,
yeah.
I think to me, it's like collect everything, right? Like obviously that's in my space. I want all of it, right? And it was interesting to think that the differences in people who care about privacy. I don't know. I don't have data in front of me specifically about sports fans and how much they care about privacy versus others. But you see kind of generational up and down on how much they care about being tracked and everything. And if you're in that truly middle ground, it was something like millennials, because they were becoming digital natives, which are now older, they're having their own kids and everything. They seemed to push back against some of the data collection for quite a while, but then it seemed like the younger generation was into it because they were all online and they were posting constantly and they're trying to be influencers. But then when you get into actually surveying and asking the questions about tracking, it seems like when you ask straight up, do you want to be tracked? The answer is no. But if you say, I want to be targeted correctly so that I'm not getting trash in my news feeds, the answer is yes. But it's like, okay, these things are opposed to each other. And so I think it's hard to know what the answer is because the question being asked is so intrusive and nobody wants to think they're being tracked, right? And we heard from the person at Whoop, and we were talking about this in the green room. It's like, no one cares what I did on my run today. No one cares. What they're interested in is all of the people my age that did a thing around that performance ability and that pace and that speed or whatever collapsed together to find out something about that piece of the population. But everyone thinks when you say, oh, I'm being tracked, that someone actually cares. No one cares which subway I took. They care where everybody is at so they can say this is a busy area on the app. They don't care what I'm doing with my day. But that distinction is tough when people don't understand the tech and how tracking works, right? Then you get these news stories that come out about somebody got in an accident in their car, produced the data that they're going 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, and that pushes them back into, I don't want to be tracked. Like, what if that happens to me? So you're kind of balancing this line of people not understanding what the tech is ultimately trying to do while it's tracking you. And that's the scary part, right?
Yeah, Kyle, the generational point, I love that too. You mentioned COVID a little bit, Mike, and, I really want to hit that point. Obviously, the pandemic did a number on all of us, and everybody in this room was impacted in some shape or form. And I kind of want to ask you all just, what has stayed that we thought might have would have left as things, change, from cashless to reducing touch points,
Yeah, I think I'll probably just repeat a few things I have said, but it is the key to our success is the reducing of lines and eliminating the friction, right? It's a frictionless, is a super hot term. Maybe it's a little less hot now, but that's how we succeed. And I think that was a lesson that got pushed. I mean, I think we've said this across all industries, but like COVID, sped up the timeline on a lot of these things. And I think that's 100% true with cashless. I don't know that was true with mobile, which we talked about mobile ordering.
Right.
In arena mobile ordering, which is fascinating because people do that in their homes all the time. But I think it is reducing touch points. Reducing friction touch points and reducing lines. That's the lesson learned that will stay around for a long time. I think we're probably cleaner now than we were before, and we care more about that, especially in a large venue. I think there was an understanding that it's kind of dirty when you go to a large venue, especially with a sports team. And I think that went away a little bit. I know in the venues I've been in, that's been true since COVID. So
you guys are spanking new over at UBS. So
it could be dirty on day 2, though.
Our venues are clean. Yeah.
Your venue's beautiful. But yeah, we put a lot of time and effort into cleaning, doing that the right way, and reducing the friction in the arena. And I think that's what makes people, they come because there's the event they want to see, but they probably come back and consider us, especially in the New York market. We have other venues that offer very similar entertainment here. So it's important for, I think, both of our venues to really make sure it's a really good experience. We're not the only place you can see our things.
Yeah, I mean, I echo exactly what he said. The cleaning aspect is it's cleaning. Yeah, the venue is always clean, but it's really dedicating, to door handles and doors and all these things that we take for granted, and really, there's just such a focus on it. Everybody's focused on it. Everybody wants to be healthy. And so, yeah, the cleaning aspect, that's a great point. Yeah.
For me, it's been the shifting pressure of the brand So a lot of the time you look at the venues, naming rights and sports teams and everything, they sort of drive the conversation. Like, you want to be associated with us. We are the sporting event. We're the team. We're the whatever. And the brand just foots the bill and goes, that sounds great. We want to be associated with the Islanders or whatever. That sounds great. But during COVID, when you started tightening down budgets and everybody's worried about what's going to happen with the money we're spending, and obviously sponsorship and advertising is the first one to start coming down. So the brand power of saying, we want to understand where our money is going. We want to understand exactly how to measure that. We want to understand year over year, why are you raising our, next year's contract is, 10% higher, whatever. What justifies that? What do we, and so it's just really doubling down with the brands being more in control and trying to better understand their return on investment from all of that money that's associated with the sponsorship is what we've seen that started at the beginning of the pandemic and has just actually gotten worse as the pandemic has gone on, or better depending on which side of the fence you're on, so that we just have to better understand those contracts and what the outcomes are, and get much tighter on the team side of writing those contracts and stipulating what the outcomes are going to be, because now they're going to pressure you on that and say, you promised X. We now have the data to support that you did not deliver X, and they're really pushing that pretty hard with these sponsorships.
Yeah, one thing I want to just add, coming out of COVID, previous to COVID, I should say, our point of sale experience was typically like a one size fits all, right? Like it's Clover Bypass, for example. And so we would leverage somebody like that for all of our different points of sale when it comes to, food and beverage. Coming out of COVID, now it's like, well, this club space, fans want to start a tab, right? And maybe that's a challenge for them, but somebody else does it better. And so, now a couple years out of COVID, we have a half a dozen different POS systems to handle the demand of the fan, depending on the space or the use case.
We're starting to wind down here, but before we get out of here, I would love to just get, I know you guys don't have a crystal ball, but I would love to get one hot take of what these modern arenas will be like in 10 years from now. Can you leave us with one? Are we walking in, every patron with a face scan, or are we wearing VR in the seats? I would love to leave us with one.
I'm a little more brick and mortar in the way that I operate and the way I view technology. But I will say that I don't think we're going to be there. I think that people go to the live events for a very specific experience and sharing it with others. But I do think that you're going to see. It will continue. I was just talking about this a second ago, but we're going to continue the frictionless experience. So from a security standpoint, when you talk about like Evolve or Extract One or Che Open Gate, like I think that that's going to be widespread as that technology advances and the leagues become more comfortable.
Evo, the security. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're just walking in. So that line's gone. We're getting much closer on your almost like a touchless ticket scanning. I think that the facial. I know MLB's doing it. Maybe there's something there. We'll see how that kind of evolves. It still feels like that can be a little cumbersome to even just get like set up and online. And how do you do like an event with 20,000 people where maybe 5 of them are, have already done their face scan, you still have 15,000 people coming through. So that might not fully, but we'll see. I definitely going to follow that one closely. But I think it's continuing to have people just leave their house, come to the venue in the easiest way possible, enter the venue in the easiest way possible, and sit in their seats, get their food, get their drink as much as possible, and do the same thing on the way home. And all the different ways that we can do that, I think, is the main focus for us. And then just one other thing I'll add is that I think we're moving in, and I know Barclays does this, and we focus very heavily on it, is sustainability. And I think that it's interesting because large venues are inherently not very sustainable in just their existence and what we do and the amount of electricity we use and gas and everything, and the amount of waste we produce. But there are things we can do, and I think there are incremental spends from an expenses standpoint, and I think the partners want to be a part of that as well. So I think there is a lot of opportunity there. I know we're focusing very heavily on it right now, and it's a big part of our story. So I think that that's a really big opportunity, and I think you'll see a lot more of that, not just in the venues you're in, but through teams and platforms and digital platforms and the way we promote it, because we have really big voices, and that's my pitch.
Like that.
Yeah, I think I echo that on the sustainability piece. That's a really great point. From a tech perspective, I look at MSG Sphere and all the things that they're doing from an innovation standpoint.
Next week, opening up.
That was cool.
So I think there are opportunities there from an immersive audio perspective. We talk about AI for everything, right? And so there's a lot of there's a few companies out there that are really driving AI from a content creation perspective. But I feel like it hasn't landed yet, right? Like you have to watch the video board to enjoy it type of thing. And so I don't know if we'll be there in 5 years, but I think, the developments towards getting to that point where it really is an experience, whether it's holographic or whatever it may be, to just boost the fan engagement experience. But also outside of the technology world, I think MSG does this really well in terms of identifying other revenue streams, right? So we don't want to just be a basketball team or sports and entertainment venue. We want to be hospitality, right? We want to open the restaurant. We want we want to own the hotel that you stay in, and then the restaurant that you go to before the game, and then you come over. So I think things like that. Obviously, that's outside of the technology space, but building the profile of the perfect fan and capturing all those data points all throughout, I think it's going to be massive for us in particular, and I'm sure others in the future.
That goes into the mixed-use boom that we're seeing in a lot of stadiums. And
I'll go quick since I know we're out of time. But everybody's walking in and looking at this, and it's still not very integrated with what's going on with the actual event. So this integration is the next pioneer. It's like if you're already going to be looking up stats or plays or whatever, and every time there's a break with what you're trying to do in promotions between game breaks or anything like that, people are on it anyway. Figure out how to tightly integrate those pieces of tech together and make it part of the fan experience because they're on it anyway.
I love that for sure. And you guys have the Snapchat deal at Barclays too, so that's perfect.
Yeah. Just trying to leverage as much as we can from a fan engagement perspective. Yeah.
We got a couple questions out here. Anybody want to throw one out here? Or okay, she's giving me the no. We ran out. We passed our time. Kyle, Mike, Brandon, I appreciate you guys for coming up here. And thank you all. This has been Smart Stadiums and the Digital Arena Revolution. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.